Listen, if you could learn to see God in your problems, your pain would stop feeling like punishment and start feeling like preparation. What if the worst thing happening to you right now is actually the most important thing shaping you? You don't see life as it is, you see life as your mind has trained you to see it. The moment you learn to see God in everything, traffic, failure, waiting, pain, life will never look the same again. Right now, you think this problem is ruining your life. But what if it's actually building it? Your pain is not random, your delay is not accidental, and your struggle is not meaningless. Your problem is not the problem, your perception is. Your mind is not a mirror of reality. It is a lens, and whatever lens you choose to look through, that determines what kind of world you live in. Two people can wake up in the same city, walk the same streets, face the same economy, deal with the same weather, and yet one says, "What a beautiful day," while the other says, "What a miserable life." Not because life changed, because their lens did. You don't see life as it is, you see life as you are. That's a simple idea, but it carries enormous power. If your mind is trained to look for problems, you will find them everywhere. If your mind is trained to look for enemies, you will meet them daily. If your mind is trained to look for lack, you will always feel behind. But if your mind is trained to look for meaning, life begins to teach you instead of torture you. The world does not suddenly become kinder. You become wiser. And wisdom is the ability to see more than what is obvious. Most people let their environment train their mind. They let circumstances decide their outlook. They let failure define their future. They let disappointment write their story. That is backwards. You must train your mind deliberately, just like you train a muscle deliberately. You don't wake up strong by accident. You don't wake up disciplined by chance. You don't wake up with vision just because time passed. You develop it. You shape it. You choose it. When something goes wrong, the untrained mind says, "This is the end." The trained mind says, "This is a lesson." When something hurts, the untrained mind says, "This is unfair." The trained mind says, "This is forming me." When something takes longer than expected, the untrained mind says, "I am being denied." The trained mind says, "I am being prepared." That is not positive thinking. That is higher thinking. And higher thinking produces higher living. Your mind can either be a window or a wall. A window lets light in, a wall keeps light out. Some people build walls with their thoughts. They wall themselves into fear. They wall themselves into resentment. They wall themselves into excuses. Others build windows. They let in awareness. They let in patience. They let in perspective. And perspective is the beginning of peace. If you see every hardship as an attack, you will live defensive. If you see every hardship as instruction, you will live developed. Life is not here to break you. Life is here to build you, if you can see it correctly. A farmer does not curse the soil for being hard. He knows hard soil makes strong roots. He does not complain about the seasons. He prepares for them. He understands something most people forget. Growth requires pressure, strength requires resistance, maturity requires time. So the question is not, what is happening to me? The better question is, what is this making of me? Because every event carries two things, a burden and a benefit. The burden is obvious, the benefit is hidden. The untrained mind only sees the burden, the trained mind looks for the benefit. And what you look for, you begin to find. That is why training your mind is the greatest investment you can make, not in money, not in property, not in position, but in perception. If you correct your perception, your direction improves. If your direction improves, your destination changes. You don't need a new life, you need a new lens. You don't need different circumstances, you need deeper understanding. And understanding begins the moment you decide, I will not let life happen to me, I will let life teach me. That decision alone changes the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you wait, the way you work, the way you suffer, the way you succeed. Because now nothing is wasted. Not the pain, not the delay, not the disappointment, not the effort. It all becomes part of your education, and educated people do not curse their lessons, they use them. When a person learns to see God in everything, something quiet but powerful begins to happen inside the mind. Fear starts to lose its authority. Not all at once, not like magic, but steadily, like darkness fading when the sun rises. Fear lives on the idea that life is random and dangerous and unfair. Faith is born from the idea that life has order, meaning, and guidance. The difference between the two is not what happens to you. The difference is how you interpret what happens. Most fear comes from feeling alone in the world, alone in struggle, alone in decision, alone in uncertainty. But when a person begins to see God in everything, Even in small things, that sense of isolation begins to dissolve. A closed door is no longer proof of rejection. It becomes a signal of direction. A delay is no longer a sign of punishment. It becomes a period of preparation. What once felt like chaos begins to look like design. The untrained mind looks at trouble and says, this is dangerous. The trained mind looks at trouble and says, this is developing me. One response produces panic. The other produces patience. Fear says something is wrong. Faith says something is working, even if I cannot see the full picture yet. And that shift changes behavior. A fearful person rushes. A faithful person prepares. A fearful person reacts. A faithful person reflects. When you believe that life is guided instead of random, you stop fighting every inconvenience. You stop turning every challenge into an emergency. You stop interpreting every hardship as a threat. Instead, you begin to ask what this moment is shaping in me. What strength is being formed here? What wisdom is being planted here? That question alone rewires the nervous system. The heart slows down. The mind opens up. The spirit stands taller. Seeing God in everything does not mean pretending that pain feels good. It means understanding that pain can be useful. A surgeon causes pain to heal. A teacher causes discomfort to educate. A trainer causes strain to build strength. Not all pain is destructive. Some pain is instructional. When you can see that, fear loses its sharp edge. It no longer screams disaster at every difficulty. It starts to whisper opportunity. Faith is not the absence of trouble. Faith is the presence of meaning. It is the confidence that something is being arranged, even when nothing looks arranged. It is the ability to walk through uncertainty without surrendering to panic. When a person believes that there is wisdom behind events, they stop collapsing under pressure. They start collecting lessons. Fear focuses on what might go wrong. Faith focuses on what is being built. Fear looks at the storm and predicts loss. Faith looks at the storm and predicts growth. One creates tension, the other creates endurance. Over time, this difference becomes visible in a person's posture, in their tone, in their decisions. The fearful life shrinks. The faithful life expands. When you see God in everything, you do not become passive. You become calm. You do not stop acting. You stop panicking. You do not surrender effort. You surrender despair. You still work. You still plan. You still struggle. But you do it with an inner steadiness that fear can never produce. And gradually, something beautiful happens. You no longer feel hunted by life. You feel guided by it. You no longer feel targeted by problems. You feel trained by them. What once made you anxious now makes you attentive. What once made you bitter now makes you thoughtful. What once made you afraid now makes you wiser. This is the rewiring. Fear teaches the mind to expect harm. Faith teaches the mind to expect growth. Fear says protect yourself. Faith says prepare yourself. Fear says hide. Fear says run. Faith says stand and see what this moment has to teach. When a person trains their mind to see God in everything, they do not lose their problems. They lose their panic. They do not escape hardship. They escape hopelessness. And that is a far greater victory, because a person without panic can think clearly, choose wisely, and walk forward steadily even when the road is uncertain. Pain is one of life's great instructors, though most people try to avoid the classroom. They treat pain as an enemy, as if its only purpose is to disturb their peace and interrupt their plans. But pain, when understood correctly, is not merely something to endure. It is something to interpret. And interpretation is where purpose is found. Most people ask, why does this hurt so much? But a wiser question is, what is this shaping in me? Pain has a strange way of rearranging priorities. It strips away what is unnecessary and brings attention to what truly matters. Comfort tends to make us careless. Difficulty tends to make us thoughtful. And thoughtfulness is the beginning of growth. When a person believes that suffering is meaningless, it becomes heavy and bitter. It feels like punishment without explanation. But when a person begins to see that pain may carry a lesson, the weight changes. It is still heavy, but now it is useful. It is no longer just something to survive. It becomes something to study. A child who never struggles never learns balance. A student who is never challenged never learns depth. A person who never feels lost never learns value. Pain sharpens perception. It teaches what pleasure alone cannot teach. It reveals weaknesses, exposes illusions, and shows where strength must be built. Many people try to rush past pain. They want it to end quickly without asking what it came to show them. But pain ignored is pain repeated. Life has a curious habit of returning lessons until they are learned. What you refuse to understand emotionally, you will often experience again practically. Pain also has the power to humble pride. It reminds a person that control is limited and that certainty is fragile. In that humility, something important can grow. Compassion grows there. Patience grows there. Perspective grows there. A person who has been wounded and healed often becomes wiser than one who has never been tested. When you see pain only as a wound, you close yourself to its message. When you see pain as a teacher, you open yourself to transformation. The same experience that makes one person resentful can make another person refined. The event is the same. The meaning is different. Purpose does not erase pain, but it redeems it. It takes what could have been wasted and turns it into understanding. A broken plan can create a stronger direction. A failed attempt can create a better method. A deep disappointment can produce a deeper character. Life seems to use pain to build foundations. Just as muscles grow by resistance, so does inner strength. Without resistance, there is softness. Without difficulty, there is fragility. The soul, like the body, needs strain to develop endurance. Pain also gives context to joy. Without winter, spring would be ordinary. Without darkness, light would be unnoticed. Without struggle, success would feel empty. Pain draws the lines that make meaning visible. The danger is not pain itself. The danger is misreading it. If you read pain as proof of failure, you will shrink. If you read pain as proof of formation, you will expand. One creates fear, the other creates maturity. Those who learn from pain gain a kind of quiet confidence. They know that even the hardest moments can carry instruction. They stop asking only how to escape and start asking how to improve. They do not waste sorrow, they convert it. Pain does not arrive to destroy purpose. Often it arrives to reveal it. It shows what matters, what must change, and what must grow stronger. It presses on the weak places so they can be reinforced. It slows the careless and awakens the unaware. A person who understands this no longer sees suffering as an interruption of life. They see it as part of the curriculum. They may not enjoy it, but they do not despise it. They look for what it is producing. And what it produces is depth, resilience, and wisdom. Gratitude is not just a polite response to good fortune. It is a way of seeing. It is evidence that a person is paying attention to more than what is missing. Most people wait for life to improve before they feel thankful. A wiser person becomes thankful first and discovers that life improves because of it. Gratitude is not born from abundance alone. It is born from awareness. The untrained mind notices what is wrong before it notices what is right. It sees the crack in the wall, but ignores the shelter the wall provides. It complains about the meal but forgets the hands that prepared it. It curses the delay but overlooks the journey. Gratitude reverses that habit. It trains the mind to look for value instead of absence, and what you consistently look for, you eventually learn to see. When a person lacks gratitude, it is not because life has given them nothing. It is because their attention has been placed in the wrong direction. They measure their condition against what others have and feel cheated. They compare their chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10 and feel defeated. Gratitude brings the mind back to reality. It says, look at what is already present. Look at what is already working. Look at what is already possible. A thankful person is not blind to difficulty. They are simply not dominated by it. They understand that every day carries both trouble and treasure. To see only the trouble is to live half awake. To see the treasure is to live fully alert. Gratitude sharpens perception. It makes small things visible. It makes ordinary moments meaningful. There is something else gratitude does. It changes behavior. A person who appreciates their work works better. A person who appreciates their relationships treats people better. A person who appreciates their time uses it more wisely. Ingratitude wastes energy on complaint. Gratitude invests energy in care. Gratitude is also a form of humility. It recognizes that not everything you have was manufactured by your own effort. Some things were given. Some things were protected. Some things were allowed. That recognition creates respect for life. It softens arrogance and strengthens responsibility. When someone says they believe in higher purpose, but cannot find anything to be grateful for, their belief is still theoretical. Gratitude is belief practiced. It is faith in action. It is the acknowledgement that even unfinished circumstances can hold value. Even delayed plans can hold instruction. Even painful seasons can hold insight. People often ask how to develop gratitude. The answer is simple but not easy. You must practice noticing. You must pause long enough to observe what you usually rush past. You must name what you usually ignore. Health becomes visible when sickness threatens it. Time becomes valuable when it runs out. Relationships become precious when they are tested. Gratitude is learning these lessons before loss forces them upon you. Gratitude also protects the spirit from bitterness. Bitterness grows when a person believes they deserve more than they receive. Gratitude grows when a person realizes they have already received more than they deserved. One creates hardness, the other creates peace. One narrows vision, the other widens it. A grateful mind is not easily offended because it is too occupied with appreciation. It does not spend its strength on envy because it is busy with stewardship. It does not demand perfection because it understands process. Gratitude allows a person to live with open hands instead of clenched fists. Life will not always be fair, but it is often generous. It will not always be easy, but it is frequently instructive. Gratitude is the language that recognizes these gifts. It is the habit of saying this moment matters even if it is not comfortable. When gratitude becomes a way of thinking, not just a word spoken, something shifts. Circumstances may remain the same, but experience changes. The same job feels more meaningful. The same home feels more secure. The same routine feels more purposeful. Vision has improved. Gratitude does not deny struggle. It simply refuses to let struggle define the whole story. It says there is more here than pain. There is growth here. There is guidance here. There is something to learn and something to value. When you look at another person and see only their behavior, conflict is almost guaranteed. Behavior is surface level. It is what people do when they are afraid, tired, insecure, or untrained. But when you learn to look beyond behavior and see the human being underneath, something changes in the way you respond. You stop reacting only to what is visible and start considering what is invisible. Most conflict is not born from cruelty. It is born from misunderstanding. People speak from their wounds. They defend their fears. They protect their pride. And when two untrained minds meet, each one assumes the other is the enemy. But when you train your mind to see God in people, you stop seeing only the offense and begin seeing the struggle behind it. A harsh word often comes from a heavy heart. A stubborn attitude often hides insecurity. A critical spirit often reveals disappointment. When you recognize this, you do not excuse bad behavior, but you no longer personalize it. You begin to understand that what comes out of a person is usually connected to what is going on inside them. Seeing God in people does not mean you agree with them. It means you remember they are more than their mistake. It means you understand they are in a process just like you. They are learning, failing, adjusting, and growing in ways you cannot fully see. That awareness softens judgment and replaces it with patience. Conflict thrives when each person believes they are completely right and the other is completely wrong. Compassion appears when you realize both people may be partially blind. One sees their pain, the other sees their position. Neither sees the whole picture. When you remember that you listen more carefully and speak more thoughtfully, if you believe there is divine value in every person, you stop reducing people to labels. You stop calling them difficult, foolish, or hopeless. You start seeing them as unfinished, and unfinished things require time, not condemnation. A builder does not insult a house that is still under construction. He works on it. The moment you see God in people, you stop needing to win every argument. You start wanting to preserve the relationship. You stop trying to dominate and start trying to understand. Victory in conflict is not proving the other person wrong. It is preventing the situation from destroying connection. Compassion is not weakness. It is discipline. It requires more strength to stay calm than to explode. It requires more maturity to ask questions than to make accusations. It requires more vision to forgive than to retaliate. Compassion is strength guided by understanding. When you see God in people, you also become more aware of your own faults. You remember that you too are learning. You too have spoken from frustration. You too have acted from fear. That memory keeps you humble, and humility is the foundation of peace. Many disputes continue not because the issue is unsolvable, but because pride refuses to bend. Pride says I must be right. Compassion says I must be wise. Pride seeks control. Compassion seeks clarity. Pride wants to punish. Compassion wants to restore. A person who sees God in others does not rush to assume bad intent. They pause. They consider. They look for context. They understand that everyone is carrying something unseen. Some carry grief. Some carry pressure. Some carry regret. When you see that, harshness loses its appeal. Seeing God in people also changes how you correct them. Correction without compassion becomes cruelty. Correction with compassion becomes guidance. The goal is not to wound the person. The goal is to help them see more clearly. A mirror does not shout at your reflection. It simply shows you what is there. When conflict arises, the trained mind asks a different question. Not how do I win this, but what is this revealing? It may be revealing a misunderstanding. It may be revealing a fear. It may be revealing a lesson in patience. Whatever it is, it becomes an opportunity to practice character instead of anger. If you want fewer enemies, develop more understanding. If you want less division, develop more vision. If you want peace in your relationships, start by seeing worth where you once saw opposition. When you see God in people, conflict no longer feels like a battle. It feels like a classroom. Each disagreement teaches you something about yourself and about others. Each tension tests your ability to remain grounded. Each difficult person becomes a lesson in patience and perception. Compassion does not mean you allow harm. It means you respond with wisdom instead of instinct. It means you choose growth over resentment. It means you recognize that beneath every argument is a human being searching for dignity and meaning. A setback is usually interpreted as proof that something has gone wrong. Plans failed. Expectations were disappointed. Effort did not produce the result that was hoped for. The untrained mind sees this as loss. The trained mind sees it as adjustment. Life has a way of redirecting energy before it allows progress. And what feels like being pushed backward is often the beginning of being positioned correctly. Strength does not come from ease. It comes from resistance. Muscles grow because weight pushes against them. Character grows because circumstances push against it. If there were no obstacles, there would be no development. If there were no delays, there would be no patience. If there were no disappointments, there would be no depth. What appears to be an interruption is often an invitation to grow stronger inside. A setback tests more than your plan. It tests your interpretation. You can look at it and say this is the end, or you can look at it and say this is the beginning of refinement. One response weakens you. The other response trains you. The event itself has no power over your future. The meaning you assign to it does. Many people collapse not because they face difficulty, but because they believe difficulty meant failure. They assume that if the road was hard, it must be wrong. But the hardest roads often lead to the most durable destinations. Easy paths rarely build endurance. They only build comfort. And comfort has never been the source of strength. A setback has a strange ability to reveal what is fragile and what is solid. It shows where confidence was borrowed instead of built. It shows where faith was shallow instead of rooted. It exposes habits that cannot survive pressure. In that exposure, something important becomes possible. Weak foundations can be repaired. Shallow roots can grow deeper. Illusions can be replaced with understanding. Spiritual strength is not loud. It does not announce itself. It grows quietly while a person is forced to wait, adjust, and reflect. Waiting teaches trust. Adjustment teaches humility. Reflection teaches wisdom. These qualities cannot be rushed. They must be cultivated in moments when control is limited and answers are incomplete. When things go according to plan, a person learns efficiency. When things go against the plan, a person learns resilience. Efficiency helps you manage success. Resilience helps you survive reality. Without resilience, success becomes fragile. Without struggle, confidence becomes shallow. A setback also rearranges priorities. It makes you ask what truly matters. It removes distractions that once seemed important. It brings focus to what cannot be replaced. Health becomes precious. Time becomes valuable. Relationships become significant. These realizations do not come easily. They come through disruption. There is also a discipline hidden inside setbacks. They slow a person down long enough to correct direction. Speed without direction only increases distance from the goal. A pause can save years of effort. A failure can prevent a greater collapse. What feels like loss may be protection in disguise. Spiritual strength is built when you continue to act with integrity while outcomes are uncertain. It is built when you keep your word even when results are delayed. It is built when you remain patient while nothing seems to move. This kind of strength cannot be purchased. It must be practiced. The setback teaches you to separate identity from outcome. You are not your failure. You are not your delay. You are not your disappointment. You are the one who learns from them. And the learner always becomes stronger than the event that taught the lesson. Those who understand this do not waste setbacks. They study them. They ask what needs to change, what needs to grow, and what needs to be released. They treat the experience as training rather than tragedy. And training always produces capability. What looks like a step backward may be the gathering of strength for a greater step forward. What feels like collapse may be the clearing of weak structures. What seems like loss may be the removal of what could not support the next level. A person who can see this does not become bitter when things go wrong. They become alert. They do not curse the delay. They prepare during it. They do not panic when the plan breaks. They rebuild with better materials. Every setback carries the potential for spiritual strength because it demands inner resources. It calls for patience instead of panic. It calls for faith instead of fear. It calls for understanding instead of anger. When those qualities answer the call, the person who emerges is stronger than the one who entered the trial. When a person becomes aware that God is present in daily life, Behavior begins to change in quiet and practical ways, not because of fear and not because of rules, but because awareness reshapes intention. What you believe is watching influences how you act. What you believe is guiding influences how you choose. Awareness is not an emotion. It is a discipline of attention. Most people live as though moments are isolated and actions are private. They behave one way in public and another way in solitude. But when a person believes that life itself is observed and ordered by something higher, the division between public and private begins to dissolve. Character becomes more consistent because it is no longer performed for people. It is practiced for conscience. Awareness of God's presence brings a sense of accountability that is not forced. It is internal. A person begins to ask not only what is allowed, but what is worthy. Not only what can I do, but what should I do? That question changes habits. It changes speech. It changes patience. It changes how time is used and how promises are kept. Small actions begin to matter more. A careless word is no longer harmless. A dishonest shortcut is no longer convenient. A neglected duty is no longer invisible. When awareness grows, integrity grows with it. Integrity is simply doing what is right when it would be easier to do what is easy. Awareness also slows a person down. It creates pause before reaction. Instead of responding immediately to irritation, there is reflection. Instead of acting on impulse, there is consideration. That pause is not weakness. It is wisdom. It allows a person to choose their response instead of being driven by habit. When someone believes that God is present in every situation, they stop separating life into sacred and ordinary. Work becomes meaningful. Waiting becomes purposeful. Silence becomes valuable. Nothing feels completely wasted because everything is potentially instructive. A delay is not just lost time. It becomes time to examine direction. A failure is not just embarrassment. It becomes information. This awareness also changes how people treat one another. If you believe that every person carries divine value, you become more careful with your tone. You become more patient with flaws. You become less eager to judge and more willing to understand. You still correct, but you correct with respect. You still disagree, but you do not dehumanize. Awareness produces responsibility. Responsibility is not burden. It is clarity. It says my actions matter, my choices matter, my words matter. Not only because they affect me, but because they shape the environment around me. A person who lives with awareness stops blaming circumstances and starts managing conduct. There is also comfort in awareness. When a person believes they are not alone in their effort, endurance increases. They work with greater steadiness. They face difficulty with more composure. They do not assume every hardship is random. They look for guidance within it. This does not remove struggle, but it removes despair. Awareness does not make a person perfect. It makes them conscious. Conscious of motive, conscious of direction, conscious of consequence. And consciousness is the beginning of change. You cannot improve what you do not notice. You cannot refine what you ignore. Daily behavior is shaped by daily belief. If you believe life is only mechanical, you will live mechanically. If you believe life is meaningful, you will live deliberately. One produces routine, the other produces purpose. One drifts, the other chooses. Awareness also teaches gratitude. When a person sees each day as guided, they stop treating it as disposable. Time becomes precious. Opportunity becomes visible. Even ordinary moments carry weight. A meal is no longer just food, it is provision. A conversation is no longer just noise, it is connection. A challenge is no longer just frustration, it is development. This kind of awareness is not loud. It does not announce itself. It shows up in patience when it would be easier to rush. It shows up in honesty when it would be easier to hide. It shows up in kindness when it would be easier to withdraw. When awareness of God's presence becomes steady, behavior becomes stable. A person is less driven by mood and more guided by principle, less controlled by impulse and more directed by purpose. Life does not become perfect, but it becomes intentional. And intentional living is the mark of maturity. It means you are no longer wandering through your days. You are participating in them. You are no longer reacting to life. You are responding to it. You are no longer simply existing. You are choosing how to exist. That is the quiet power of awareness. It does not shout. It shapes. It does not force. It forms. And over time, what it forms is a life that is guided instead of accidental and a character that is built instead of borrowed. Most people say they believe in higher meaning, but their lives are still shaped by habit and fear. That is because belief can exist in the mind without ever reaching the eyes. There is a great difference between what you claim to believe and what you actually see. When belief stays as theory, it sounds good but does little. When belief becomes perception, it changes how you interpret everything that happens. A theory is something you agree with. A perception is something you live with. Theory sits in the background like a decoration. Perception stands in the foreground like a guide. Many people carry beliefs the way they carry books on a shelf. They own them, but they do not use them. Perception is different. It is belief put to work. It is belief that has learned how to look. When belief becomes perception, it stops being an idea and becomes a filter. It decides what you notice and what you ignore. It decides whether you see danger or opportunity, loss or lesson, chaos or order. Two people can believe the same words, but only one of them sees life through those words. The other only repeats them. If a person believes that life has meaning but still sees every difficulty as punishment, their belief has not yet become perception. It remains theoretical. But when a person begins to look at difficulty and ask what it is shaping, belief has crossed into vision. It is no longer something they hold. It is something they use. Perception determines experience. You do not experience events as they are. You experience them as you interpret them. That is why one person is defeated by a problem and another is developed by it. The event is the same. The lens is different. And the lens is built from what you truly believe. When belief becomes perception, you stop waiting for proof before acting. You start acting from trust. You do not demand certainty before moving forward. You move forward while learning. You do not need every answer to take the next step. You only need direction. This kind of belief changes the way you handle time. Waiting is no longer wasted. It becomes preparation. Delay is no longer rejection. It becomes alignment. Uncertainty is no longer an enemy. It becomes a classroom. Life is no longer something that happens to you. It becomes something that teaches you. Perception also changes how you talk to yourself. Instead of saying this is unfair, you begin to say this is forming me. Instead of saying this should not be happening, you begin to say this must be showing me something. The language inside the mind determines the posture of the spirit. A person with theoretical belief still collapses under pressure. A person with perceptual belief collects lessons under pressure. One sees only the weight, the other sees the weight in the workout. One becomes resentful, the other becomes resilient. When belief becomes perception, faith is no longer something you visit on special days. It becomes something you practice in ordinary moments, in traffic, in fatigue, in conflict, in disappointment. It shows up in tone of voice and patience of response. It shows up in how you treat people and how you treat yourself. Perception does not remove hardship. It removes helplessness. It does not erase struggle. It gives struggle context. It does not promise ease. It promises meaning. And meaning is what allows a person to endure without becoming bitter. Most transformation does not begin with a new circumstance. It begins with a new way of seeing. When you see differently, you choose differently. When you choose differently, you act differently. When you act differently, results begin to change. Not because life changed first, but because vision changed first. Belief that stays in words remains fragile. Belief that becomes sight becomes stable. Words can be doubted. Vision directs behavior. A person who sees purpose in events will not abandon effort easily. A person who sees growth in difficulty will not quit quickly. A person who sees guidance in delay will not panic. This is the turning point. When belief becomes perception, life stops feeling random and starts feeling arranged. You may not understand the arrangement, but you trust that it exists. That trust shapes your patience, your courage, and your consistency. And that is when life truly transforms. Not because the world suddenly becomes gentle, but because the mind becomes guided. Not because trouble disappears, but because meaning appears. Not because everything works out immediately, but because everything begins to work inwardly. Belief as theory informs the mind. Belief as perception forms the life. One stays on the shelf. The other walks with you through every day. One is spoken. The other is seen.